I mean, we need this kind of stuff on camera because people don't believe us when we go and tell them. So, I don't know. So you were just explaining this other program that sounds a lot like the Neighbors Campaign right now.
Yes,
Can you just tell me about that?
this goes back quite a long time. When I came into the county in 1987, this program already existed. And it was known as the Community Service Aid Program. It originated in the old test center, which was the Tacoma East Silver Spring Center, and then it moved out to other regional centers, to Mid-County, to Silver Spring, ultimately to the center in Germantown. The idea behind it, and let me back up a moment and say that it was a very costly program. And that's why we don't do it anymore. But the idea behind it was that you would have people who would work on a very labor-intensive basis with new Americans or other people who needed human service. Back then we called it social services, and there were some health kinds of services. And here in this center, we had people, 3 community service aides. One worked with the Latino community, one with the Middle Eastern community. We have many Middle Eastern folks here. And because of this gentleman's particular incumbent's language skills, also he spoke Russian. So he worked, we had a very large influx of Russian immigrants in the early 90s. And then the third was worked with mostly the Vietnamese community, but other Asian communities as well. And what they did was they met with people who had issues with obtaining services or larger issues in their acculturation their acculturation process. And they became de facto case managers for them. Often the bureaucracy was too much for these folks to handle, and folks almost inevitably had multiple issues, so that if they would go into a human service agency, they would go through an entire process, but there would still be problems that they might be having with domestic violence or with children having problems in school or with incidents with neighbors. And these community service aides would walk them through county bureaucracy and ensure that they got the services that they needed, but at the same time they would deal with the larger problems, and they literally saved lives. They saved lives. One very good thing, do you still have time on the? One thing that happened here that I never forgot, that was very important to me, is our Latino community service aide realized that many Latina women, I guess that's redundant, but Latinas had domestic issues, and they did not know how to access services here, or else culturally they felt that they couldn't. And she put together a women's group here in the 3rd floor of this building. And when she told me that she was going to do this, I decided, gee, maybe I could slip something into the learning process among these immigrant women. And what I asked her to do was to get somebody who could talk about what it means to be culturally part of the larger communities. What were the do's and don'ts of living in the larger community? Because we were at that time having some issues with neighbors calling areas of Latino, largely Latino apartment complexes and making complaints about certain behaviors. And so we built this into the curriculum about what it takes to be, what are the commonalities that you don't stand on stoops and perhaps say things to women going by, that sort of thing. And within this women's group, she got somebody, again, who's part of the community, to talk about these things while they talked about their own personal issues. And the most interesting thing happened. These women went back to their menfolk and told them and talked to them about the things that they had learned. And for an entire, I would say, 2 years, I stopped getting complaints from the abutting community about that particular apartment complex. So it worked. It worked. And it worked for the women, it worked for the community. And then it went away.